Hi students, I just wanted to introduce you to our podcast project. You can find all the details right here on our module, CrimJust SI podcast. So remember that you can do a lot with this podcast. There's no right way to do it. What we do want you to do is think about an area of the criminal justice system that is really interesting to you and something that you want to look further into and explore further. Or you could think about an area of the system that you think needs improvement, and you can kind of explore that. This needs to be a project where there is a group of two, or you do it alone. So a group of two, or you do it alone. Like I said, all the details can be found right here. And there are a bunch of links, but I want you to focus on a few. For the first stage of this project, you're really trying to focus on your research question. So you're going to click on this link here in a second, but let me just introduce these to you. So how to begin an audio story, starting your podcast, helpful tips, how to record a conversation on your phone, Ms. Broncoli's helpful presentations right here. And let me just make a side note that during this entire project, you can talk to Ms. Broncoli and Ms. Wenger in the library about content, research, and how to actually do the technical pieces of a podcast. So they're invaluable resources. Please use them. This one's great, the list of the top 10 criminal justice podcasts. If you need help kind of understanding what a really effective podcast is, check out one of these. And we're going to use this in a second, and then the rubrics here. So for today, we're going to look at the last two. All right, so let's start with the 5 W's. So the 5 W's, what should you ask before starting a story, right? You're going to think about what's the driving question, what is it not about, what are my dream ingredients, what do I really need to include in my podcast to make a significant impact on the listener? How will I engage my audience and hold them? That's tricky as well. How am I going to make sure that my story is fair to the people and ideas represented? And what is the audience going to remember when it's over? What are they going to take away? So for homework, during Thanksgiving break, we want you to think of these things, and you're going to fill out each one of these little slides. It's like going to be your outline, okay? So what is the driving story? What's the driving question of your story? A question gives you a mission, a puzzle to solve. And the process of answering this question focuses on your reporting and allows your story to become a journey for the listener or the reader. For example, why are members of the state legislature voting to give themselves a raise? That's a question that can take you in all different fascinating directions, right? There's probably not one right answer, which is compelling for your listener. So what's your driving question? What do you want to know more about? What do you want to dig deeper into? For some of you, it could be policing, use of force, implicit bias. For others, it could be the public defender's office. It could be the prosecutor's office. It could be judges and sentencing. It could be mass incarceration. It could be the 3 strikes law. Their sky is the limit. So find something that's really interesting to you. Okay, next, what is it not about? So when you don't have a strong driving question, you're at risk of going on a tangent. And that could really lead your listener astray and lead them to not understand where your focus is or what you're trying to do. So it's helpful to have a strong guiding question. How will I ensure that the story represents the ideas and the people in it? Okay, so take a look at that. I like this. Seek tension. Stories that present only one viewpoint often lack the tension that a compelling story needs. So if you focus on one person or situation, ask yourself where the conflict resides. Challenge yourself to bring some of that conflict into your podcast. How will I engage my audience? Okay, the judge and I are going to have to listen to 17 podcasts. One time I had to listen to 150 of them. So how did the students keep me interested? Well, that can happen in a lot of ways. It can happen with your question, your music, your transitions, the people you interview, your quotes, all of it. Speaking of that, what are your dream ingredients, right? So that is quotes, moments, scenes, observations. Maybe you look back in your notebook from when we went to San Quentin. Transitions that tie pieces together. What's going to give the story personality? Finally, what will the audience remember when it's over, right? When they take their AirPods out and they kind of go back to whatever they were doing before, what is going to stay with them from your story? What's going to make them think differently than they might have if they didn't listen to your podcast, okay? So the 5 W's is what you're going to complete over Thanksgiving break, and we will review those with you when we get back. And we'll have time in class to work on this too, okay? Let's go to the rubric. By the way, I'm using Descript right now, and it's pretty cool. All right, here we go. Our rubric is divided into multiple categories. So we have introduction, content, the interview, technical production, and delivery. Let's start from the top, right? So how are you really going to grab your audience? Immediately, right? You want to have a catchy and clever intro. That could be a compelling piece of data. That could be a quote. That could be another person talking. So how do you want to start? And be sure that you tell us who is speaking, the date when it's produced, and where the speaker is located. Okay? Content. We're looking for creative, original content that enhances the purpose of the podcast in an innovative way. Accurate information is represented. Vocabulary enhances the content. So we're talking about some pretty sophisticated topics here. So you're going to have to define those for your listeners, right? For example, when we do implicit bias or mass incarceration, 3 strikes, sentence realignment, things like that, you want to make sure that you define for your audience. And if you're interviewing someone, you can even ask them to define it, and that would be highlighted in your podcast. Includes a wide variety of appropriate, well-researched, and informative sources. And you have edited quotes from each expert source. All right? You're going to need 2 primary and 2 secondary at least. So 2 primary sources, those are going to be your people who are actually involved in the situation, right? They're primary. They're right there on the front lines. That's going to be a police officer, an attorney, a judge, a correctional officer, someone who's incarcerated, someone formerly incarcerated, right? Someone who's done the work. Your secondary source is going to be a person who's analyzing or commenting on the work, right? So that could be a college professor commenting on incarceration data. That could be, the sentencing project commenting on wrongful convictions, things like that. Interview. So the interview is going to be the most engaging part of your podcast, and that is when you want to find your interview, and we'll help you with that. We have a database full of experts ready to talk to you. That will come in a little bit, but you're going to have to come up with questions that you want to ask them first. And some interviewees like to hear the questions in advance. Some are fine doing it on the spot. You would just have to have that conversation with whoever it is that you're interviewing. Okay? So follow-up questions as well, right? So think back to when Anthony was talking to us about being sentenced to 102 years to life as a juvenile, right? We asked him about that. After he answers, right, he gives a pretty courageous answer, an honest one, you don't want to just go to the next question. You want to affirm what he says, thank him for what he's saying, and then ask a follow-up question. There's power in the follow-ups, and we'll practice those. Next is technical production. That's all about kind of how you build your podcast, right? That the transitions are smooth. There's not a lot of background noise or dead space. The time is 8 to 20 minutes. So your podcast could be 8 to 20 minutes. There's a good volume, there's effects, and the sound is interesting and keeps the attention of your listeners. And finally, delivery. right? It's smooth, it's rehearsed, you have effective enunciation, you keep the audience listening. And these two are really important. All the team members, if you're doing it with a partner, are fully engaged in the whole thing from beginning to end, right? Okay, so this is going to be due on the very last day of the semester, which I believe is December 17th. And so you can turn it in from now until then. When we get back from Thanksgiving break, I will put a link up there and you'll be submitting it on Canvas. All right, so again, for homework, you are going to fill out the Beyond the 5 W's and you're going to submit that to Canvas. Okay? The judge and I will be with you through the whole entire thing, so please lean on us, ask us questions, and we will give you some time in class to work. And we'll give you a heads up as to when that time's coming so you can prepare if you're going to have an interview during that time or something like that. All right? Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you soon.